Okay, can y'all hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, let's make a start. So, my name is Claire Agutter, and today I'm going to talk to you about cybersecurity and really why this is such a critical area for those of us who work in service management. So, cybersecurity, if you follow the news, if you read about it on Twitter, is being mentioned more and more, and today really my aim is just to kind of summarise the key things that you should be thinking about and maybe get you to go away with a slightly different perception on cybersecurity. So just before we get started, quick show of hands. Has anybody here ever had a security breach at their company? Wow, you guys are really honest. Normally you ask that question and people go, no, not us. Cybersecurity it's almost IT's dirty little secret, because you talk to companies in public, have you had a breach? No, not us. You talk to them in private, wow, everybody's got a story to tell. And I found this when I was talking about cybersecurity with one of our suppliers, quite an important supplier in our value network. And they said, oh yeah, we got hacked. And it was one of those hacks where they take your data and you've got to pay money to get your data back. So, right, should you have been telling me, your customer, at any point about this particular thing that happened? But they didn't feel that was relevant. So we're going to look at kind of protecting ourselves so that things don't happen, but also the fact now that we almost need to accept something is going to happen and we need to be ready for that. So just to kind of summarise what I'm going to be talking about, we're going to take a look at the current threat landscape. So go back 5-10 years, we were all doing security to a certain extent, but it didn't have the criticality that it does today. I'm going to look at what cybersecurity means for those of us who work in service management, and then I'm going to introduce you to a new product called RESILIA, which has been written by the same company that owns ITIL now. So RESILIA is a cybersecurity approach that is very easy for us service managers to understand and adopt. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as well, and potentially how that could help your organisation. So just a little bit about me, for those of you that don't know me. I'm from the north of England, so most of you here probably speak English a lot better than I do. Hopefully you can understand me okay. I've had many roles in service management, but for the last 8 years I've been running a training company that specialises in e-learning and just doing small bits of consultancy. But really for me, I'm interested in anything that can help IT work better. So go back again 5 or 10 years, we pretty much did ITIL and we did Prince 2, and that was it. Whereas now the landscape is so much broader. There's Agile, there's DevOps, there's Scrum, there's cybersecurity, there's Lean. There is so much going on, and this is such an exciting time to be in IT. And one of my key messages to you as service managers is just to emphasise that we can't rely on a single framework or a method anymore. We have to have a really holistic toolkit. We have to have lots of different areas that we can draw on in order to fully deliver value to our customers and to the business. So this image here, the threat landscape, just shows you some of the companies that have been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. None of us want to be in the headlines for having some kind of security breach. We need to be prepared for the fact that that might happen. But if you look at the companies there, you've got some big names. The eBay attack had 145 million accounts compromised. That's absolutely massive. You can go and read upon some of the others if you want to, I don't know, frighten yourself before you go to bed tonight. The danger with looking at case studies like this and talking about hundreds and millions of accounts, the danger is that we start to get complacent and think, well, I'm just a small business, or, well, I'm a public sector organisation, I'm a government agency. this isn't as important to me. But do you know what? It's even more important for you, especially if you are a small business. If you think about eBay, 145 million accounts. But do you know what? eBay haven't gone out of business. eBay's press team, eBay's public relations could swing into action, and I don't really think this made much of a blip in eBay's results at all. If you think about a small business that might be breached, if you're a small organisation, you might rely on 2, 3 key customers. If you have a breach and one of those key customers leaves you because of that breach, that might be actually fatal for your business. So one of the points today to really kind of emphasise is this isn't just for big organisations. It's not just for profit-seeking organisations. Every single business is at threat. And we're going to look at where some of those threats are coming from as well. So again, if you go on the internet and do any kind of research, there's a huge amount of statistics available. Some of them you can maybe attach slightly more credibility to than others, but I've just kind of picked a few here for us to have a look at. So 73% of large organisations suffered from infection by viruses or malware. And that's the 73% that actually admitted to it when they were asked the question as well. You might even find that that number is higher. But it's the ones at the bottom that I think are particularly interesting. So 50% of users are opening emails and clicking on phishing links within the first hour. That's quite frightening to me. We tend to think of ourselves as fairly sophisticated people now. You know, we're fairly threat aware. But all it takes is an email from somebody that you know with a subject line that looks reasonably convincing. And before your brain's even had a chance to kick in, before you've started to think, you've clicked on that link. And that's when a breach happens within 82 seconds, quite commonly. We're all a potential source of risk for our organisations. And thinking back to some of the earlier presentations that we've seen today about things like bring your own device, the increasing use of smartphones, the risk is just increasing exponentially. And as service managers, we need a strategy to deal with that. It's not somebody else's problem anymore. So, 95% of security incidents involve human error. Look at these people. Look how happy and normal they look. Look at them sharing the laptops, waving bits of paper around. Yes. And I think you could possibly be fair to, like I said, these statistics are fairly widely published. Oh, you think it's 100%? Interesting. Okay. I would take that. I think that's reasonable. Yeah, and I think that is possibly true. We're trained to think of security as something that we can fix with technology, but the majority of the time it's human error, and human error can be something like, well, I didn't patch it, I didn't patch the technology. That's human error. So. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I'm going to let you come to all of my presentations because normally people think that figure's too high. So somebody saying it should be 100%, I would go with that. But really, all of these people should have big red warning lights flashing above their heads because they're all a danger. I mean, looking at you guys now, there's quite a lot of you tapping away on your smartphones. Hopefully you're tweeting nice things. But you don't necessarily know the person next to you. When you're sat on the train reading your emails on your smartphone, you don't know the person who sat next to you. I was sat on a train the other day and there was a lady next to me tapping away on her laptop. She was writing emails and she was writing feedback from the job interviews she'd just done with names. So I knew the two people who hadn't got the job, because I'm quite nosy, I will read your emails. So I knew the two people who hadn't got the job. I knew the person who had got the job. I knew why she didn't think one of the candidates was credible. This is dangerous stuff, but as technology becomes more integrated into our lives, we think less. And this just sums it up wonderfully. This makes me laugh every time. So in our corner, we've got all the technology that's available to us. We've got all sorts of encryption, firewalls, complicated passwords. And in the other corner, we've got Dave. Apologies, Dave. It's not you. And even if at your organisation you start with a razor focus on security, even if at the beginning as part of your induction, somebody sits you in a room and talks at you for an hour and frightens you and then makes you sign something to say that you've been frightened, that kind of goes away over time. So the first time you get that email to reset your password, you create something really complicated. But then the next time it happens, you put the number 2 on the end, and then 3, and then 4, and you just keep going like that. Back in my service desk days, we had somebody who was always ringing for password resets. This was before we'd automated password resets. And then they stopped. And we thought, that's brilliant. All these little memory tricks we've been teaching them, something's finally worked. What was it? Post-it note underneath the keyboard with the password on it. That is not a secure solution. So we need constant nudging. We need constant reminding, training. We don't want the reminder or the nudge to be that something's gone horribly wrong. As service managers, we need to think about how are we communicating with our user base, with our own staff? How are we actually instilling security into every single thing that we do? So, whose problem is it anyway? What you see in many organisations is a security team, or a security person, or a security manager. You know, ITIL's got a process, information security management. That's fine, but it's not that team's job to make sure that everybody behaves appropriately. That team should be providing governance, it should be providing management. Creating a security team and thinking that fixes all your security issues is very similar to creating a continual improvement team and just putting all your problems over to the continual improvement team. We need to think about how we're going to embed security into every single thing that we do and how we're going to make sure that users are aware, that staff are aware, all of our stakeholders. Do you need to integrate your suppliers into your security policies and your security processes? We need to think about that as well. So these are some statements that I'm going to go through that have come from some organisations, and maybe think about your own organisation as we're looking at these, see whether perhaps any of these are relevant for you. So the board and the leadership team say, well, we've got risk and security teams. If they want to talk to us about a risk, or they want to bring us a business case for investment, we'll be happy to consider that. So that's your first red flag, because you've pushed that accountability for security onto the security team, and the board is effectively standing back, holding its hands up and saying, not my problem. What we actually need from our corporate leaders is we need governance, we need direction. As an IT department, we clearly need to understand what level of risk the business is able to tolerate. We need to understand any legislative or regulatory requirements, so that if you've got a senior management team that's kind of washing its hands of security, you're in a little bit of trouble already, because you'll always be driving these initiatives from the bottom up, and that's never a particularly comfortable place to be. So then you've got your risk or your information security teams. So we set standards and policy, and we expect everybody to adhere to them. And we'll check every now and then just to see if you're doing it. So that check, that might be your annual audit. If any of you are ISO 20000 accredited, or if you have internal auditors, you might have gone through that process where you think, oh, the auditors are coming. We need to write some documents and we need to make them look old like we use them every day. This is the danger of just checking compliance. People will do the minimum required, and they will do it when they need to do it. Embedding security as a way of thinking within our organisation is not about some kind of checkbox exercise. So the information owners, we flag the information as sensitive. Now go do it. Again, there's a bit of kind of not my problem, somebody else's responsibility. We should absolutely be working with the information owners. And one of the things we should be doing as an organisation is making sure that we understand the classification of all of our information. What have you got on your smartphone that's dangerous? What have you got in Dropbox? What's on your laptop? What happens if you lose your laptop? So yes, we need that from the information owners, but then we need to be continually working with them as well. And then lastly, you've got your IT delivery and your development teams. So quite often where your service manager is actually sat as well. We own the services, but we don't have the detailed technical knowledge to do everything. So what we need is kind of a holistic, business-led approach to security. It needs to start from the top. We need to be working with the information owners, and we need to drive this down through the organisation. So some of those statements maybe look a little bit familiar to some of you. I saw a few of you nodding. This is something that you have to have your business take seriously. If the business doesn't take it seriously, you won't get the resources, you won't get funding, people will be doing things that they shouldn't do. So kind of thinking about who's involved, we also need to think about what to protect. So as a business, do you actually know what your critical information assets are? Who do they belong to? Has anybody told you if they're important or not? And one thing that we find with the companies that we work with is they're fairly good at classifying new data. So if there's a new service, they'll look at what data is going to be held in it, and they'll think about how that needs to be protected. They're really, really bad at looking after legacy data. So the old applications, the stuff that's held on maybe mediums that we don't even know how to access anymore. We've got all this legacy data that's kicking around. And the first question we need to be asking is, do we actually need all this stuff? Should we be having a big tidy up and a clear out and getting rid of some of this data that just shouldn't be there anymore? Because if we don't need to keep it, we can get rid of it, and we don't have to protect it. And we've reduced the scope of what we actually need to manage as an organisation, which, you know, can be a really good start. There's a book around at the moment that's very popular called The Magical Art of Tidying Up. And it's about making your socks really neat in your sock drawer. We need to apply that to data from an IT perspective and clear out all the rubbish that we've been holding on to for years. So, starting to think about where we would like to go with our organisations and what we need to put in place. Roles and responsibilities. If you've got a COBIT background, if you've done any work with COBIT or IT governance, you might kind of be familiar with this type of structure. So the governance should be coming from the senior management team or the board. It should be coming from the information owners, and it should be coming from audit teams as well, if audit is applicable to us as an organisation. If that top piece is missing, it's not fair for us to be expected to know what to do at the lower levels. You've got your leadership and management, so your risk and security and your IT strategy. That's feeding on that governance, and that's identifying where to invest, how to change the service portfolio, what we might need to do in order to make sure that we are protected. And then from a delivery side, process owners, we should be integrating security into every single one of our IT service management processes. Most of us have a tick box in the change management process. Has this got any security implications? Tick, yes. And we might do something about that. But we should be integrating this into incident, event, problem. The service desk are absolutely critical. Availability, capacity, all of our design processes. It should be in our service level agreements. This absolutely is part of service management and part of what we do. And I'm going to look at an example slightly later on of how we would integrate this into event management. But, you know, this expands to all of our service management processes. So what does good look like for an organisation? Put your hand up if you think your organisation's good at cybersecurity. One. Talk to that lady afterwards. So what does good look like? This is normally where the excuses start to come out. Oh, we'd love to be more secure, but we haven't got time. We haven't got enough money. We haven't got the resources. We were really busy. There was that major incident last week. It's not good enough. If we're not doing this, the next major incident is going to be us, and it's going to be us that's in huge amounts of trouble as well. So what does good look like? It's things like having the right people. It's things like working in partnership with the business. It's things like having an organisation that focuses on risk. So making sure that this isn't audit driven. This is integrated into every single thing that we do. It's not a once a year run around and panic and update the risk register. Who's got a risk register? Put your hand up if you've got a risk register. Oh, a few, not so many. I have to confess, we had an audit last week, and just before the audit, I went and updated our risk register. I'm not saying I'm perfect here either. But what we need to do is look at the business that we are in. You need to look at the business your organisation is in. You need to look at your business drivers, and you need to start thinking about what does good look like for you. This is not about spending money that we don't need to spend. This is about protecting ourselves as an organisation. And one useful exercise just to kind of help focus the mind can be to sit down and think about what the potential impact of a breach could be for your organisation. And it could be reputational, it could be lost turnover, lost customers, it could be loss of IP if you're a business that relies on your own IP. For some organisations, you know, government organisations, it could be really massive impact on people's life. We were working with a council recently, and if their IT systems aren't available, if people die, they're not allowed to be buried or cremated because the paperwork can't be done. And that's, you know, that's a massive impact on people who are grieving. So we need to understand what's the impact for each individual organisation, because that then helps you define exactly what you need to do. So cyber resilience. There's a lot of talk about cyber security, and when the authors of RESILIA started thinking about it, they decided to define this term cyber resilience. So what they wanted to cover was how we protect ourselves to make sure a breach doesn't happen, as well as being sure that we would be able to react if a breach happens. So cyber resilience covers all of that. It's the protection side, how do we make sure we're safe, and it's the what happens if the worst happens side. So it's the ability for us to resist, respond and recover from incidents as well. You will never be 100% safe. There are things you can do to make yourself safer, but there is always a danger. And many of them come from within the organisation. So cyber resilience is about keeping our data safe. it's about understanding the value of the data. You know, we're not just kind of storing all this stuff for fun. What does it mean for us as a company? It's about how we minimize damage and then how we prevent that or how we respond to that. And this RESILIA guidance that's been written kind of covers all of these areas. And this is absolutely in our remit as service managers, because we're not just talking technology, we are talking training, we're talking behaviour, marketing, press, comms. In a way, it's a very similar set of capabilities as you have for business continuity management and your IT service continuity planning. You can apply a lot of the same skills and techniques as you do there. And you know, coming back to those figures about the percentage of organisations that have had a breach, for most companies, it is a case of when it happens. It's not a case of if it happens. We have to try and be right every single time, and the hackers only need to be right once. And this, again, embeds in every single organisational process. If you think down to something like request fulfilment, somebody's asking for access to a piece of software. What checks are you doing? What level of access are you giving them? When you take on a new staff member, what are we giving them in terms of induction? Are we actually checking our references? We do tend to get complacent as an organisation, and sometimes something bad has to happen in order for us to then react and do something and improve. But there are so many things we can do, and some of them are just tiny, tiny bits of good practice that we need to put in place. Our little chap in the balaclava, sadly, that's not how it is. You know, we think if we get hacked, it's going to be some master criminal. It might be the Chinese, you know, state-sponsored terrorism. Most of the time, it's some spotty teenager in a bedroom, or it's somebody actually within the organisation that you've annoyed and you didn't realise. We need to be realistic about where these threats are coming from. So RESILIA, this new set of good practices, is a guide that's been put together, and they've aligned it to the service life cycle. So for those of us that are working in an ITIL environment, it's very, very easy for us to pick this up and add it to what we're already doing as service managers. So having a strategy for cyber resilience, designing it into IT services, transitioning it, operating it, monitoring it and continually improving it. So there's a book that you can buy. The book is really, really good and has been written by a international team of people with really good service management and security skills. There is some organisation-wide awareness learning, they're calling it. It's not released yet, it's going to be released next month, but this is just tiny little snippets of e-learning, 5-10 minutes, that you can use as part of your induction process, and you can use as part of your ongoing organisational nudging for people as well. There's also a cyber pathway tool, which is going to be released at the end of this month. That's going to be available for free on the Axelos website. So Axelos, the owners of ITIL. And the cyber pathway tool will guide you through a series of questions that you can then use to assess your current level of cyber resilience. You can export your results. It's all nice and pretty and traffic lighted and everything. So you can export your results, and then you can go back in after you've made some changes and perhaps look at where you've made some improvement. You can use it to build a business case. It's a really nice tool. And there's also training courses as well. So some of the service providers that we work with, used to be quite common for the large service provider organisations to say all our staff are ITIL trained, so you know they understand your processes. What we're seeing now is some of the service providers we work with are saying our staff are RESILIA trained, so that you know they understand the value of your information and they will protect it. So RESILIA tries to balance a number of different areas, and again, if you're familiar with ITIL, that concept of balance is heavily embedded in service operation. So it's balancing things like risk and opportunity. The one thing we want to avoid is being so secure that we can't do business anymore. You know, when Wi-Fi was first becoming available, a lot of companies, oh, we're not touching that Wi-Fi, you can hack it with a Pringles tube. Now everybody uses it. The same with bring your own device, checking your emails on your own smartphone. Oh, we're not too sure about that. It's finding an appropriate level. There are still, government agencies like the Ministry of Defence in the UK. You don't even take your smartphone in the building because that's the level of security that's appropriate for them. If your information is less critical, you can find a level of security that is appropriate for you, and that will allow you to balance the risk that the organisation is exposed to with still being able to take advantage of opportunities. Balancing the time and the money that we spend on prevention, detection and correction as well. If we've got a fairly blasé attitude to risk, we might decide we're just going to put money into correction. If it happens, we'll deal with it. If our information is maybe more sensitive, we might front load a lot more of that investment and put it into the prevention and the detection side, because the faster we can find out that something's happened, the easier it's going to be for us to deal with it. So I'm going to speed up a little bit here. I've been a bit slow. Just thinking about how you might start with this in your organisation. Building collaboration. So I'm going to look at some of the different stakeholder areas that you want to have involved and what you need them to do. So we're service managers. Start with what you've got. Start with IT and service management. Make sure that everybody in your service management organisation understands that security is part of their job and it's not just something that Bob and Bill over in the security team do. Everybody needs to be doing it. And make sure that we have an understanding of this balance between risk and opportunity. So when those service requests come in, who is it in the business? What do they need? What does that mean from a security perspective? Look at the specialist skills that you've got and look at how they can be used. So if you've got a security team, if you've got security specialists, how can they help you get this going in your organisation? I've worked with a few organisations where the security team, they thought they were the police. They were dreadful. They didn't want to engage. They didn't want to help. Your security team should not just be somebody who's coming and telling you off because you left a piece of paper on your desk. Get your security team working with you and building policies that are going to work. Make sure your management team are giving you the backing that you need. And that's not just, in terms of time and resources. They have to be walking the walk with this as well. If you are trying to introduce new security policies, but you've got senior managers who are blatantly not following any of them, you're never going to get that buy-in across the organisation. So get this into senior management's heads, show them some horror stories, frighten them a little bit if you need to, but they have to be your champions. And again, engaging with the information owners in the business. So a lot of the presentations we've seen already have been about building that relationship with the business. They need to be telling us what they want us to protect. It's not IT's job to invent this stuff and put a series of controls in place. It's down to the business to tell us exactly what we need to do so that we can deliver the solution that supports their outcomes, but lets value be delivered as well. And then get everybody involved. IT end users, staff, your suppliers, everybody needs to be involved. If you've got a security policy, turn it into something that's easy to read. Don't drop a 50-page document on people's desks and expect them to read it. Turn it into an infographic, turn it into a series of cards. Get the key points down. That's absolutely essential. And treat this as organisational change. This is organisational change, so it needs to become part of our behaviour. As long as people see it as just, what you have to do to not get in trouble, you're not really winning. People have to be actively aware of risk, and they have to be proactively coming to you as well when they think they've identified a risk. So this is an example of a service management process which, is ideal for integrating into our security policy. Event management has a service management role to play and a resilience role. And it's kind of a good example because The more of this we can automate, the better. We shouldn't be finding out there's been a security breach because somebody's ringing the help desk. We should be finding out because we've got automation and monitoring in place that has identified an unusual level of traffic to the network or an unusual level of emails that are being sent. So things like event management, incident management, making sure the service desk have been trained to identify a potential breach. All of these things are just normal everyday service management, but we can integrate cyber resilience into them. And this one, maybe one for you to kind of take away and look at when you get the slides after this, but just showing you how cyber resilience and IT service management kind of overlap at the governance level, at the business level, and at the individual process level as well. There's no excuse really for us not doing this. There's no excuse for us not integrating this into what we do. And then just thinking about why security programs fail, because if you've been with your organisation for a while, you've probably seen this come and go. You know, something happened, we had a big security initiative, and then everybody got bored and went back to doing their day jobs. Treat this like an organisational change programme, very similar to bringing in service management processes. We want people to work in a new way. So watch out for things like unreasonable expectations. You know, everybody thought ITIL was going to be the silver bullet that fixed everything. Hey, it's not. And the same with cyber resilience. We're looking to make improvements, but let's be realistic. Reliance on a single training exercise. One company that we work with makes everybody do some e-learning, and then they have to tick a box to say, yes, I did the e-learning. What actually happens is they go have a cup of tea while the e-learning plays, and then they come back and check the box. That's not good enough. We need to find ways to kind of drive this into people's behaviour. So we could quite easily title this slide, you know, why do IT service management programs fail? It's the same reasons. It's all about cultural change. So just to wrap up with a few takeaways to consider, kind of a few thinking points for you. Is your organisation at risk at the moment? Nobody put the hand up apart from one person when I said, are you on top of this stuff? So yeah, I think we can say there's a bit of potential for risk there. Is your management team taking this seriously? That's one of the key points. What critical information assets have you got? And have you got a plan? If something did happen, what would you be doing? Would you all be running around screaming? Or have you got a plan that's been rehearsed? Would you know what to do? Would you know who to talk to? So maybe think about those for your organisation as some takeaways for today. If you want to engage with me after the presentation, I am here for the rest of the day. I'm also on Twitter at Claire Agutter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm the only Claire Agutter in the world, so if you search for me on LinkedIn, that's me. So I'm happy to kind of continue the conversation there as well. But do we have any questions for the end of today? I know it's lunchtime, so. No? Thank you very much. Thank you.